And the wake is, comes from a story that I heard Alan Watts tell one time, and it was a very powerful story. He said, your life is like a boat, and it's heading up the river at, say, 40 knots. And as it's going, you are somehow able to metaphorically stand on the stern, the back of the boat, and look down into the water. Now there goes your life in this direction, and you're standing here and you're looking down into the water, and you ask yourself these three questions. The first question, what is the wake? What is it? What is this thing that you see? And the answer, the wake is the trail that is left behind. That's what it is. Nothing more, nothing less. It's the trail that is left behind. Second question to ask yourself in this little metaphor, what's driving the boat? What's making this thing go in this direction? The answer, the present moment energy that's being generated by the engine, and nothing more. That's the only thing that's making the boat go in this direction. And in this little scene, this means it's the present moment thoughts that I have and how I am using them that is making my life go in this direction, and nothing more. Because the third question is the most important and powerful question. And ever since I heard it, I've always thought about this whenever I have a tendency to look back here and blame something. Is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? That is, can a trail that is left behind make a boat go in this direction? And of course the answer to that is no, it can't. It's just a trail that is left behind. And in that trail, there are an enormous number of things, and every one of us has a wake. And we have a whole lot of stuff in it. And one of the problems that we have is that we have a tendency to look at the wake and all of the stuff that's in it to explain why it is my life isn't working the way I would like it to work. So that you can take a look at the experiences of your life. I look at the experiences of my life. In the experiences of my life, I spent some years in a series of foster homes. People have said to me, oh, living in a foster home, that must have been terrible. I said, no, it wasn't terrible at all. When you're 6 years old, you don't wake up every day and say, oh my God, I'm living in a foster home. Isn't this awful? Poor me. How come me and nobody else? You don't do that. You don't do that till you're 40. And when you're 40 and your life isn't working and you're bankrupt and you're a drug addict and your relationships are all falling apart and your family's leaving you, and you say, why is this happening to you? You say, what do you expect from me? I had to live in a foster home. My mother liked my sister better. We were too this, we were too... And so it's like we take a look at all of these things in our wake. And I'm not saying here that you shouldn't be in touch with your past and all of the things that are back there, but to use it as excuses for why you can't get where you'd like to get today is something that if you do that, you will never get to this place that I'm talking about in this program, which is this place that I call higher awareness, way beyond ordinary human awareness. One of the most powerful lessons that you can ever learn, I had to learn as a young man. My own father was a man who walked away. He left. He left home when I was just a baby. Left my mother, sitting right here, 107 years old. Is that? No, you're not. 82 years old, though. And with 3 little boys. And all I had ever heard when he walked out about this person that my older brothers told me about, and that when my mother got her family back together again when I was 9 years old, and did all that she could to make a family again, all the hardships. This was a man who never made a phone call, who never sent a penny, who spent some time in prison, who was an alcoholic, who died of cirrhosis of the liver at the age of 49 and was buried in a pauper's grave in Biloxi, Mississippi. And it wasn't until I went to his grave and was able to stand there, and I used to dream about this man and have this enormous hatred for this person whom I had never seen, just based upon what he had done to my own mother and to my brothers and so on. and all of the stories that I had heard and all the research that I had done. And I ended up at his grave 10 years after he had died, when I finally found out that he was dead. It was on the 27th of August. It was 1974. And what I did transformed my life. What I did is I believe I was sent there by God, or whatever you want to call that divine spirit, the divine presence. And my life at that time wasn't working. I was overweight, my relationships weren't working, my writing wasn't working. There were a lot of things that weren't going well for me in my life at that time. Not badly, but they weren't going at the level that I knew I was capable of getting to, because I was filled with this hatred, this anger, this bitterness. And so what I did is I stood there on his grave, on this little marker in the ground, and I said, "From now on, I send you love. I forgive you." Mark Twain said that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And once I let go of that anger and that hatred and all of my attachment to the bonding that I had done with these wounds, and let go of that and cleared that out of my life, my writing began to take place at a much higher level. In fact, I wrote Erroneous Zones in very, very short time after that. I began to get myself back in shape. I began to eat better. I began exercising, got my weight down. And the people that were supposed to come into my life, like my beautiful wife, who sits here with me this evening, and all of our children, some of whom are here this evening.
As the period of time over which I've been writing has lengthened, I'm spending more time communicating the ideas and less time figuring them out. When I wrote my first book, which was Maps of Meaning, pretty much all I was doing was trying to figure something out. It was just an exercise in sustained thought. And I worked on it from 1985 to 1999, about 3 hours a day. And I thought about it, especially when I was in my 20s, all the time. I was thinking about it like 13 hours a day, and the ideas were just running through my mind at a rate far higher than I'm capable of now. I was trying to figure something out. I was trying to understand malevolence, I suppose, among other things. But when I wrote the last two books, I was trying to communicate some of what I thought I had learned. And so, but a lot of it's still trying to solve to answer a question. When I lecture, for example, and I usually do that without notes, I have a question in mind. It's like, okay, well, in the biblical lectures, for example, the first one is, I think it's about 2 hours long, on the first sentence of Genesis. The question is, well, what does this sentence mean? And so the lecture is an exploration of what it means. And I'm trying to think it through. And at the same time, I'm communicating that process of thinking it through. And that's what I'm doing with my books. And the books are written to me, which is why I think I've gotten away with giving advice. The books aren't really advice, or if they are, I'm included in the population of idiots who needs the advice. So, these are things I haven't. The last chapter is be grateful in spite of your suffering. I've had real struggle with that. So although I know perfectly well that resentment, regardless of the cause, is not productive, I was devastated when I finished it, which is a common experience, people, and it speaks to the nature of human motivation. We often think, well, once I get to point B, that's where you're headed, everything will be okay. It's like, no, that's not the case at all. Is that now you need a new point B. So, and that was really, because I don't work at the university anymore, and I don't have my clinical practice anymore, and so those are losses of structure for me. And I had the book to anchor myself while I was so ill, and it was invaluable, and still is, for that matter. Find a partner and stick with them. That's hard. Try to make yourself into better people if you can. It's a challenge. Have kids, have grandkids. Thank God I have grandkids. Thank God I have kids. They're of unquestionable virtue. And so And then if you're lucky, you have other projects and you're healthy enough to undertake them.